According to a new report, the United States is drawing up contingency plans for military deployments in Japan and the Philippines in case of an emergency over Taiwan. Japan's Kyodo News Agency reported that these plans will be incorporated in a first joint operation plan to be formulated in December. The report quoted sources familiar with Japan-US relations. The report said that the US 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment, which possesses the multiple launch HIMARS, would be deployed along Japan's Nansei Island. The report added that if a Taiwan contingency becomes highly imminent, temporary bases will be set up on inhabited islands based on US military guidelines for dispatching Marines in small formations to several locations. Japan's military is expected to mainly engage in logistical support for the Marines, including supplying fuel and ammunition. Israelis continued airstrikes on Beirut after its military said that Hezbollah fired about 250 missiles into the country on Sunday, in one of the militant group's heaviest barrages in months. The group said the projectiles were directed at the Ashdod naval base. Medical agencies claimed that at least 11 people were wounded. Also, Hezbollah claimed it destroyed 6 Israeli Merkava tanks in Lebanon's south, 5 in the strategic coastal area of Beada, and 1 in the Deir Mimas. EU diplomat Josep Borrell, who is in Lebanon, held talks with Parliamentary Speaker Nabi Berri, who has led mediation efforts on behalf of Hezbollah. Borrell told Berri there's only one possible way ahead: an immediate ceasefire and the full implementation of UNSC Resolution 1701. Under the resolution, which ended the last Hezbollah-Israel war of 2006, Lebanese troops and UN peacekeepers should be the only armed forces present in the southern border area. There have to be no Hezbollah fighters involved. The resolution also called for Israel to withdraw troops from Lebanon and reiterated earlier calls for disarmament of all armed groups in Lebanon. United Arab Emirates has announced arrest of 3 individuals in connection with the murder of Zvi Kogan, an Israeli Moldovan rabbi living in the Emirates. Kogan's body was discovered by authorities after he had been reported missing on Thursday. The 28-year-old had been working in the UAE as a representative of the Chabad Hasidic movement, an ultra-Orthodox Jewish group. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the killing, calling it an abhorrent anti-Semitic terrorist attack. He vowed to use all means necessary to bring those responsible to justice. Ukraine is reportedly losing ground in the Kursk region of Russia. A senior Ukrainian official reveals that over 40% of the land that Ukraine had seized in its incursion has now been reclaimed by the Russians. Ukraine controlled over 1,300 square kilometers. This is what was claimed as per reports, and that figure has now dropped to 800 square kilometers. The unexpected incursion in August by the Ukrainian forces had caught Moscow off guard, prompting Russia to deploy thousands of additional troops in the region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has recently warned that Russia aims to push Ukrainian forces out of the area by January 2025. Yamandu Orsi will be the new president of Uruguay. According to the official result, the left-leaning politician has won the presidential runoff. In his victory speech, Orsi promised to be a president who calls again and again for national dialogue to find best solutions. Orsi, who represents the Broch Front Alliance, defeated Alvaro Delgado of the National Party, a member of outgoing President Luis Lacalle-Pau's centre-right Republican coalition. Delgado, meanwhile, conceded defeat, saying he was sending a big hug and a greeting to Yamandu Orsi.
El país.
Pro-Russian candidate Kalin Georgescu surged unexpectedly in Romania's presidential election, pulling ahead of the pro-European Prime Minister. The election looked set to advance to a runoff. Exit polls had initially showed centre-left Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu with a comfortable lead and put a centre-right candidate in second, suggesting the far-right would be shut out of the runoff next month. However, with over 98% of ballots counted, the right-leaning Georgescu was leading. The winner will take over from President Klaus Iohannis in the largely ceremonial post. At least 6 people were killed and 10 were wounded in a violent armed attack in the southeastern Mexican state of Tabasco. The shooting took place at a bar in the state capital, Villahermosa. Witnesses say a group of armed individuals entered the bar, seemingly targeting a specific person. The group opened fire, hitting several bystanders. Authorities say 5 of the victims were found dead at the scene, while the 6th died shortly after being taken to hospital. Local officials have confirmed that an investigation is underway, while the motive behind the attack remains unclear. They have suggested that it may not be linked to organized crime, though that theory has not been ruled out entirely. While there have been no arrests so far, federal authorities have pledged full cooperation with local law enforcement. Officials in Pakistan have announced a 7-day truce after days of bitter sectarian gunfights in the country's northwest. At least 82 people have been killed and more than 150 have been wounded in these attacks. In Kurram district in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, the ceasefire deal came after a delegation from the provincial government held talks with the Shia community on Saturday and met the Sunni community on Sunday. The latest violence began on Thursday when 2 separate convoys of Shia Muslims travelling under police escorts were ambushed, killing at least 43 and sparking 2 days of gun battles. Thousands celebrated the 29th annual Pride Parade in Rio de Janeiro. Dances, music and a street-long rainbow flag filled the Brazilian city's iconic Copacabana beach. This year, one of the march's themes was sustainability. A banner read, "Environmental justice will only be possible with racial and social justice, gender equality and sexual diversity." Brazil has navigated several environmental challenges this year, including floods in southern Rio Grande do Sul, wildfires across the country, and a record drought in the Amazon rainforest. Air quality in Delhi has improved marginally on Monday morning. The air quality index recorded below 300, which was the average, and that is the improvement. The Indian capital's pollution levels have now come under the poor category. That is the improvement. However, some of the 38 monitoring stations in Delhi recorded AQIs in the very poor category at around 7:30 a.m. on Monday. According to data provided by the Central Pollution Control Board, the CPCB, the AQI had worsened on previous Monday, recording the season's highest average air quality index of 495. It has necessitated the need for the implementation of Stage 4 restricting under the Grade Response Action Plan across the city. Final round of talks on a treaty to end plastic pollution opened on Monday, with the diplomat chairing the difficult negotiations, urging nations to meet an existential challenge. More than 90% of plastics are not recycled, with over 20 million tons leaking into the environments, often after just a few minutes of use. Plastic also accounts for around 3% of global emissions, mostly linked to its production from fossil fuels. Plastic pollution is so ubiquitous, it has been found in clouds, the deepest ocean trenches, and even human breast milk. Countries adopted a $300 billion per year global finance target to help nations cope with the impacts of climate change. The pledging was adopted after a complex negotiation at the climate finance in Baku during COP29. However, developing countries strongly have opposed the agreed amount, as well as the manner in which the agreement was adopted. Several countries, including India, rejected the deal, saying it did not reject the priorities of the developing nations. In an unusually angry statement after the agreement, which was adopted early on Sunday without allowing countries to make an intervention, India called the amount abysmally poor and paltry. In technology, according to a report, Chu Shou-zi, CEO of ByteDance owned TikTok, sought input on matters related to the US from Elon Musk, a close advisor to President-elect Donald Trump. As per the report, Chu initiated messages with a Tesla CEO and asked for his opinions on topics ranging from the incoming administration to potential tech policy. The report also mentions that ByteDance executives not only met with people close to Trump, but also with people close to the Democratic nominee. In a significant policy shift, the Australian government has abandoned plans to fine social media platforms up to 5% of their global revenue for failing to curb the spread of online misinformation. Michelle Rowland, Australia's communications minister, said the government was unable to drum up the support needed to pass the legislation. The bill was part of a wide-ranging regulatory crackdown by Australia. The new defunct plan aimed to balance the potential negative impacts of foreign tech platforms, including holding tech companies accountable for spreading misinformation and disinformation. The proposed legislation was met with mixed reactions. Well, if you remember this game, perhaps we've all played it at one point of time. Pokemon Go, the game managed to gain thousands and millions of fans in 2016, with millions of players taking to the streets to capture virtual Pokemon in augmented reality. Now, it turns out that the game was just a secret experiment. Players unknowingly helped create a powerful AI by collecting data about the real world. Niantic, the developer of Pokemon Go, recently revealed that this has been using data gathered from its AR games to create a large geospatial model. Once fully developed, Niantic's AI model will be allowed robots and other devices to navigate and interact with the physical world even with limited data. Moreover, the company disclosed that it has used over 10 million real-world locations. Bitcoin steadies after a rally towards $100,000, fizzles just shy of the historic level. Traders assess whether optimism stemming from President-elect Donald Trump's support for cryptos is becoming stretched. The digital asset fell after coming within $300 of the six-figure milestone on Friday. It rebounded on Monday as Trump's pick of hedge fund executive Scott Bessent for the Treasury Secretary helped sentiment in global markets. Gold tumbles after surging by the most in 20 months at last week. Traders ignore a softer US dollar while shifting their attention to the Federal Reserve's upcoming interest rate decision. The yellow metal fell by almost 2% despite a slide in the US currency, which typically aids the commodity. Investors are now focused on the outlook for monetary policy. This comes after a report showed US business activity expanding at the fastest pace since April 2022. Equities and treasuries advance with traders welcoming Donald Trump's pick of Scott Bessent for the treasury yields. They believe that it would inject more stability into the US economy and financial markets. Meanwhile, a gauge of Asian stocks rose about 1%, led by gains in Japan, South Korea and Australia. Indian stocks also reported gains, with Sensex surging over 1,200 points. Market optimism and political outcome in Maharashtra adds to investor confidence.